It's important to pay close attention when you're driving through the heart of Tokyo late at night. When it gets late, the Headless Rider appears, and if the Headless Rider overtakes you, he will cause you to crash and die. The Headless Rider is a ghost who was attacked by violent street gangs in the past. They tied a piano string across the road, which he then drove through, cutting off his head. To this day, he continues searching the roads for his missing head. Hello, and welcome to Toshiden, exploring Japanese urban legends. I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and on this show we'll be looking at different urban legends from Japan, how they came about and, when possible, the truth behind them. Don't forget to join our newsletter at kowabana.net/newsletter to keep up to date with the latest Japanese horror news and get exclusive stories each week. I send out new and interesting urban legends I come across every now and then, so don't miss out. This week, we're taking a look at the Headless Rider. Legends of the Headless Rider appear all over Japan, with some of the more common locations being the streets of Tokyo, Okutama City in the west of Tokyo, and Usui Pass on the borders of Gunma and Nagano prefectures. The Headless Rider is generally considered to be a former gang member himself, although in some versions he's an unfortunate soul who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He spends his afterlife roaming the streets, looking for his missing head, and if he overtakes you on the road, it spells your doom shortly thereafter. Stories of Headless Riders all around the world aren't new, but how did this particular one come about? There have been stories of headless horse riders and headless warriors since at least the Sengoku era. But in terms of the modern legend, it's thought that stories of the Headless Rider first spread through Japan in the early 1980s, thanks to the Australian movie Stone. The film features a scene where a gang member rides his bike through a piece of wire stretched across the road, cutting his head off, exactly like in the legend of today. The Headless Rider later featured in a special episode of Gakko no Kaidan, Headless Rider, The Curse of Death, a popular children's show which aired on August 24th, 2001. In this version, merely looking at the Headless Rider was enough to ensure your doom. Once seeing him, anything nearby that would be able to sever a head would attack. The environment, and not the rider, doing its best to kill you. This version of the Headless Rider only appeared on the day of his death, however, making it otherwise easy to avoid. On May 23rd, 2002, a very real incident that mirrored the film Stone took place. At 6:30 in the morning, a 25-year-old man rode his bike into a bookstore parking lot in Akita City, Akita Prefecture. He was on his way to work at a nearby construction lot, but failed to notice the 7mm wide, 18-meter long wire that had been placed across the parking lot entrance. The wire severed his head clean off, killing him instantly. The owners of the bookstore reported that gang members were using the parking lot at night, so they placed the wire across the entrance to keep them out. This news brought rumors of the Headless Rider back into people's minds once more, and the legend gained new life. Not long after the Akita incident, people around Japan started claiming that they saw real Headless Riders on the streets. One explanation given for this rise in sightings was black motorcycle helmets. Motorcycle gangs tended not to wear helmets at all, or if they did, They left the face wide open and unprotected. However, when wearing a full black motorcycle helmet at night, it's easy to see how a quick glance at a cyclist passing by might make it appear as though they had no head. People have suggested that some riders even did this on purpose, going out of their way to appear invisible on the night streets and taking pleasure in people's reactions to them. The increase of motorcyclists on sports bikes, where the rider leans forward while zooming through the streets, may have also contributed to Headless Rider sightings. On Mount Hiko in Fukuoka Prefecture, you can supposedly find an entire gang of Headless Riders roaming the mountain streets. Slight variations of this legend have their heads come flying at you. First, you see their bikes, and then in a different location you hear their death screams as the heads come flying. Sometimes the heads are still wearing helmets, sometimes they're not. Another version of the tale tells of a couple on a bike ride late at night. The woman, sitting behind the man, appears to be enjoying the high speeds, and so, in an effort to please her, the man drives even faster. However, when they turn a corner, he notices a bent sign sticking out across the road. He screams to warn the woman of danger and ducks, narrowly escaping with his life. It's not until he stops at the next traffic light and looks back to see if the woman is okay that he realizes she's missing her head. Some versions elaborate and claim that when the man returns to the bent sign, a voice from a severed head calls out to him, "Don't leave me here." Another, and perhaps the most famous Headless Rider, exists in Ikebukuro. Tales tell of a rider near the Sunshine 60 building who was decapitated by a falling piece of metal from a truck in front of him. The bike continued riding for several minutes after the rider lost his head, finally colliding with a guardrail. The rider's ghost continues to haunt the area after death, looking for his missing head. Some versions, however, feature the Headless Rider not looking for his head, but for the gang members that killed him. These criminals also tied a piano string across the road, which killed the rider, and then fled in a white car. If you happen to pass by that same spot in a white car, the ghost of the rider will appear, looking for those who took his life. You can also find tales told of community members troubled by noisy bike gangs late at night. In order to deal with the constant disturbances, the residents tied a rope across the street, which ended up killing one of the riders. No matter how or where he was created, the Headless Rider's legacy is sure to live on for quite some time. People do love a tragic and terrifying story, after all. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. You can help support us and get early access to both this show and Kawabana over at our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin. And if you want even more urban legends, Toshiden Volume 2 is available on Amazon right now, so don't miss out. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Toshiden, exploring Japanese urban legends. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kawabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kawabana.net now.